Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Farmhouse Dinner. Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. "Stop standing, get working." Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. "My husband Mick is missing," she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. "That's quite a road to get here. Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through." D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. "Thanks." D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa with a Gracie has. "I speak English." "So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe? D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. His name was Mick, Christina said in a low voice. Mick, your husband, has been missing. Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. For 3 days? Yes. Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house, or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know. Christina clenched her apron over and over. Did you look for him, or call anyone? D.S. Maloney barked. I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the Iron Door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there. Okay, do you have a description? Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up. Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker. She put her arms out, forming a large belly. And his face? Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. Oh. Office Marks turned away with a frown. Mean mug. Any idea where he could be? D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg. Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then, in the snow. She wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Or a wolf got him. Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me. Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. I'll check outside. You look around in here. D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide? Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf, and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. What's this? D.S. Maloney walked back in. The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else. Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. My broom, Christina offered. Is this blood? D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. Sometimes. Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough. Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story? No, you can see. Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. I cleaned up the rest. She collapsed in a chair. Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapie outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit. Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station you call around, hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles in rolled and taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think? D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life, a Christmas Day Heist. A grande whole milk latte and all the money in the cash register, Bernie said to the cashier while pointing the gun at the barista. Or the barista dies. People usually value other people's lives more than their own, or at least they should. The age 20s, something cashier's face was twitching. It was clear he had never been in a robbery before. Calgary is a safe city, or at least it was before the people from Toronto started showing up. Is this for real? Are you actually robbing the store? The cashier said. Does this gun look real to you? Bernie allowed the cashier to have a good look at the cold, hard steel of the Glock G19. The cashier raised his hands. It felt good to watch other people do as they were told for a change. Behind Bernie, a woman's voice said, That's not a good decision. And why not? Bernie sneered. Full fat milk. You should choose skim or soy. Bernie glanced around and saw a young woman with lightly bleached hair, that new style that gives women a zombie-like appearance. She was wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon figure on it. Definitely from Toronto, the weird ones are. Or Vancouver. I didn't ask your opinion. The cashier behind the register said, The grande full-fat latte comes to $7.99. Bernie pulled out a credit card, an action born out of habit, then put it back away. The robbery was not going the right way at all. You are going to give me at least $500, Bernie demanded to the cashier. The girl with the bleached hair began talking over her shoulder again. I'd like a half skinny flat white with a shot of hazelnut using my Starbucks bonus points. Firing a bullet into the ceiling would have made this robbery easier. Calgary police interview of suspect Bernie Schultz by Officer Ringenberg. Or, in your own words, explain to me what happened earlier today. BS. I usually drink coffee at Tim Hortons, so I thought it would be better to rob a Starbucks. Calgary is a big city, but this is Canada. People know each other. At Tim Hortons, no one ever gives feedback on what drink I'm ordering. Who let all the Starbucks open in Calgary anyway? It must have been those arseholes from Toronto. The same Torontonian arseholes who voted for Trudeau. How did I get here? One day, I was the site administrator of the biggest oil project in Alberta. The next day, global warming and electric vehicles means I've lost my job. Then I was dragged from my home by government thugs. They wore different uniforms than you, but were in uniform from my home. My brother, who helped me pack my things, said I needed to get used to change. This is 2023, he said. One door closes and another door opens, he says. My brother has a big mouth. At my new place in the sticks close to the forest, the fires worry me. I watch the news on CBC every night and have chats with my neighbor Ted about the fires. They didn't happen before. Not before Trudeau took over. Anyways, Ted says we need to fight the system. He said if we could get $500 together, we can drive to the Yukon and live in an abandoned cabin over the summer and get away from the lunatics in Calgary. Or, what's Ted's last name? B.S. Bennett. 2 N's and 2 T's. So back to the story. Since Trudeau took over, everything is about pointing out other people's mistakes. People are always telling me what words I'm not supposed to say anymore. Well, thank God some things stay the same. Once a week, me and Ted walk to the Tim Hortons nearby. Even Timmy's didn't have a Christmas tree this year. But that's not going to stop Bernie from having the spirit of Christmas. At that other place, people just wouldn't listen to a woman with a gun. I wanted to shoot a bullet into the ceiling to stop them all yammering. And then you all came in. O.R. Thank you, Bernie. That's all we need today. We're still collecting evidence. Before I start shooting, there's something I'd like to say, Bernie announced. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. She turned from the cashier to the barista. And you too. Merry Christmas. Ma'am, here's your latte, and have a Merry Christmas, the cashier said. Then he added, I don't usually say that, and looked at the other people listening in the store. They had stopped talking to each other and were paying attention closely, in the way every high school teacher dreams of. Bernie gave everyone present a stern look, one that showed she meant business. Her arm was getting tired. She forgot how heavy guns were. The cashier had been holding his hands up for quite a while and was getting tired too. Sorry, ma'am. I can't give you all the money in the cash register, he said slowly and calmly, because this is a cashless store. His eyeballs moved back and forth between Bernie and the sign next to the cash register. It said, This is a cashless store. Bernie groaned. It's because of those people from Toronto again. I'm from Calgary, the cashier explained. Bernie didn't know how to respond to that. Doesn't your son come in here? The cashier asked. Bernie realized at that moment she should have worn a disguise. Outside, flashing red lights appeared. Bernie watched with concern as police cars filled the parking lot. The cashier, in a kind voice, the tone a person might use to give a suggestion to a friend that the color of his sweater doesn't match his pants, said, They might shoot you if you're holding that gun. It doesn't matter what age you are. As Bernie thought about putting the gun down, one of the police looked into the window and then walked straight in. Bernie has thought they might surround the building and start a kidnapping negotiation. She had planned to ask for a taxi to the Yukon to let everyone go. "Bernie Schultz?" the policeman asked. "Who's asking? Let's take you back to Sage Hill," he said and walked straight toward her. Bernie lowered the gun that lacked bullets. Her gig was up. The police knew retirees in Calgary wouldn't give up their guns, but the retirement homes had taken away their bullets. The cashier cleared his throat. "Just for my Instagram account. Why were you trying to rob the store?" Bernie wanted to quote Willie Sutton, because that's where all the money is. But it didn't seem to fit this situation anymore. She mulled it over. The police weren't in a rush. She told the cashier, "For once, I just wanted to be in control of my own life." The cashier thought about it, then said, "The office workers that come into our store and put in complicated orders, I think have the same reason." When he noticed how many people were watching him, he added, "Not that that stereotype is representative of all people who work in offices." In the language of her own generation, Bernie explained that she also didn't mean any offense to anyone by her words and actions that day. "Sorry," she said. She left the store with the police, one holding her shoulder in case she tripped on the front step. No junior league. Running away, starting over. It's not as easy as people think. You have to give up everything. Oh, that part's easy. Everyone thinks we are all traceable, that you can't really hide. But, see, everything is tied to your identity, your papers. If you change those, you are a different person. Fingerprints? If they're in the system, if you've ever been fingerprinted, it's a little trickier. But it can be done. Oh, that's right. You're a teacher, so of course you've had background checks. Well, you'll never teach again, so it won't matter. What? I told you, you have to give up everything. When changing identities and dropping off the radar, you have to change what you do. Whatever habits you had, wherever you went, do elsewise. You won't be hanging out in bookstores anymore, and you can't join the junior league in Denver if you were in every junior league of every city you ever lived in. Change your appearance, of course, but even as a brunette, you can't join the local improv group or historical society. That's where they will look for you. Join the Corvette Club and build a persona as an expert in 1972 Flybird Corvette transmission modifications, or whatever might be a car thing that you know nothing about and could care less about right now. You can join the Quilt Club, or the Daughters of the Mayflower, I guess. If the most important thing to you is dropping out, disappearing, disconnecting, and avoiding the consequences of what you did, you have to truly start over. You cannot be the same person, because when they come looking for you, they will look for her. Changing your papers and license and online trail are just technicalities. Harder technicalities, of course, given the internet and government, but just a technicality. But you have to be willing to change, and I'm really not getting that about you. What is the good of posting misleading social media content like faking a trip to France before abandoning it all if you are just going to go to the city you've talked about since you were a kid? Oh, now you're upset? What did you think this would be like? You would change your name from Emma to Emily and go live your exact life somewhere else, just without going to jail? Were you going to get a husband named Jason, too? Oh, that was cruel. I'm so sorry. You poor thing, dealing with the consequences of your actions one way or the other. Look, I don't think you are cut out for this. You haven't really thought it through. What? No, I won't return the deposit. I don't know. That puts me at risk if I get you transplanted and then you show up at the first community theater audition and get nabbed. Yes, they will. They will be looking for you. Once they follow the dots back to you, you are a goner. They need someone to pin this on. Look, lady, it's not like you are skipping out on a credit card bill or a boring husband. A flashy murder like this, there will be a manhunt. Your picture will be out. You have to go somewhere you never talked about and have no connection to. Change what you look like. Lay low for a while. And then don't do anything you've ever done before. What kind of life is that? What kind of question is that? A life out of jail, I guess. You know what? We're done. I'm out. If you can't, okay. Okay, calm down. Yes, fine. I can still help you. But Jesus, lady, I'm not a psychiatrist. You do this or don't. I don't care. You go home, the back way, please, with your GPS and location off, and call the police and turn yourself in with some kind of sob story. Or you give me your license and credit cards and goddamn library card, everything, and take this airline ticket and this ID and catch the 4 p.m. flight to Indianapolis. Well, why not Indianapolis? Have you ever been there before? Well then, that's why. Go home and... No, you can't go home and say goodbye. You haven't heard a word I've said. Get out and dash. Oh, that's better. Good. Small bills. At least you listened to one thing I said. Let's see. Yep. That's all of it. You're going through with this then? Give me that. No, the whole purse. You can have back anything that doesn't have your name on it. Take this. You are Sarah Jackson. There's an airline ticket, driver's license, birth certificate, and 1 credit card. Here's the info and PIN for the credit card. Set up an online account. Change the address as soon as you get settled. No passport. You didn't pay me enough to leave the country. In a year, you hear me? Wait a year. You can apply for more credit. You are an orphan and a widow and have no kids. There's a paper with your history and family. Memorize it and destroy it. Do not be found with that. No one keeps around a paper to remind them who their grandparents are. You'll pass a state background check in Indiana, but a federal might get tricky. Try not to get fingerprinted. Yes, you can work. Any job you can fake. Work for cash if you can, but don't draw attention to yourself. Well, just make up a resume that you can do. There's one more service I provide. If you need a reference, call this number. Jenny will set you up. You'll get a number for them to call and get a good reference. That's the only reason to call this number. I can't get you out of any other bullshit. Well, congrats, Sarah. You have 3 hours to get to the airport. Walk about 4 blocks before you catch a cab. No, I don't care. Any direction. No, leave your car. No, you can't take your car to the airport. Are you kidding? They find your car, check cameras and manifests, and it takes them about 5 minutes to figure out Indiana. No, we can't sell it for you. Get everything you need out of it now. Listen, leave anything with your name. Don't take a receipt or Starbucks cup, for God's sake. It has to be abandoned. We'll take it out State Route 6. They'll have to dredge the quarry to make sure you didn't off yourself. Oh my God. Yeah, you're welcome, lady. You're all set. You kept about 1,000 cash like I told you, right? Split it up, put it in different places. All right, good luck. Remember, don't catch a cab right out front. Walkaways first. Oh my God, what a piece of work. Jenny, I'll be out. I have a deposit to make. Have Mario take this Corolla out to the quarry, the usual. Her? Nah, she won't make it. I give it about a month. Someone will spot her at a bookstore. Some people just can't handle change. The boy with frozen wings. You have my attention, says the grand assassin. Who? He. The boy drops his gaze to the Varos gold coin on the tavern's backroom table, his guarantee of safe audience, then looks back up at the man. The grand assassin's wrinkles and white hair may or may not be real, but the eyes are. pinprick pupils caught in still water stare back at the boy. I can't say it. Have you heard the story of the little bird with the frozen wings? The Grand Assassin asks. Are there two birds and a stone in it? No, lad. It's the one about the bird flying south for the winter. The air's so cold that his wings turn to ice and he falls into a meadow. Do you know what happens to this bird? The boy shakes his head, platinum hair peeking out despite his hood's concealing efforts. A cow comes by and drops some dung on the frozen bird, and in this steaming pile of crap, the bird's wings begin to thaw. He's ready to fly again, but now he's stuck. So, he chirps for help. The boy watches the Grand Assassin's bare hand hover over the Varos coin as the man whistles a plaintive tune that ends in a soft squawk. Finally, a passing cat hears the bird's cry and comes over to investigate. It digs the bird free, cleans him in the grass, and eats him. What does it mean? Asks the boy, willing the Grand Assassin to touch the gold coin. First, not everyone who shits on you is your enemy. Second, if you're in deep shit, it's best to keep your mouth shut. But most importantly, it means that not everyone who gets you out of shit is your friend. So do you want my help? Yes. The boy throws off his hood and says the name of the Crown Prince. The Grand Assassin's hand drops under the weight of that name. His fingers touch the Varos coin on the table, and some reptilian part of his mind notes that the coin is slick, oily even. But his higher consciousness is focused on the face before him. He is staring at the Crown Prince's exact likeness. Yes, I'm his decoy. The boy pauses, hoping the man will fill in the rest. But I don't have to be. The Grand Assassin sucks in his breath once he realizes the lookalike's audacity. Steal the life of the Crown Prince, then slip in to take his place. Can he do it? How will you explain his missing decoy then? Fire, the boy says matter-of-factly. The man opens his mouth, then closes it again. He's used to watching men squirm in the wake of what's left unsaid, but this boy makes him feel like the talkative one. He watches the boy for any sign of uncertainty, but all he gets in return is a polite blank stare. Finally, he slides the coin of Varos into his leather purse. As an afterthought, he wipes his oily fingers on his jerkin. Then, the boy tells him when and where. Their audience concluded, the boy pulls up his hood and leaves the tavern's back room. He weaves through day drunks, then through the city Azamal's maze of alleyways. He stops at a bustling marketplace and takes in his surroundings. He doesn't think the Grand Assassin has changed his mind and decided to follow now that their safe audience is over. No, the man thinks himself a cat poised above the future king. Still, a diversion wouldn't hurt. He listens to the different voices, then joins the crowd. There's a pretty lass, he says in a baritone voice, and pinches a fishwife's arse on his way past. The fishwife accosts a nearby man who's speaking in that same baritone voice to his friends. The man stumbles against a cloth merchant's stall. "Thief! Stop, thief!" the boy cries in the bewildered shopkeeper's own voice. Then, he nabs a new cloak to throw over his own as he melts away into the pandemonium. Along the way, he tears off the tainted gloves that he used to touch the Varos coin. Back in the castle confines, the boy is in another back room of sorts, a half-remembered guard tower. There's nothing to guard here because this edge of the castle wall ends on a cliff, a chasm forged centuries ago when the gods threw Varos down from on high. The inside is lined with scrolls and manuscripts bound between boards. This is the record keeper's domain. The record keeper lost his tongue for some long ago unspoken crime. From the way the man walks, the boy knows that was not all that has been cut from him. The crown prince never comes here because he is a cow whose bovine brow cannot bear the burden of reading. But the boy loves the record keeper. He is his greatest friend, his greatest teacher, the one who showed him the scrolls on poisons long forgotten. At first, the boy thought poison alone would be his answer, but the best one, Arya's kiss, takes time to act. There would be no guarantee he'd be positioned to take the crown prince's place unnoticed once the kiss called him home. Silent but ever listening, the record keeper had shown the boy a manuscript on Varos and his assassin cult. Yes, the coin, the grand assassin, it's all coming together, but there's still time to talk yet. The boy and the record keeper have their own way of speaking. The boy blasts through his repertoire of voices while pausing to listen to the tongueless man's eyes. They sit now facing each other with an imaginary coin in between them. Have you heard the story of the little bird with the frozen wings? The boy asks in a perfect imitation of the grand assassin. The record keeper's eyes brim over with pride, with adoration for the protege who gives him voice. Late in the night, he will bar the servants' quarters and start a fire. There will always be more servants, and no one will count bones to make sure the crown prince's decoy is among the last lot. For now, he watches as the boy climbs the crumbling guard tower, then jumps to the nearby hemlock tree. The boy balances on the end of a branch, then he's over the castle wall. The record keeper says a silent prayer that the boy will return riding the crown prince's horse. Deep within the hardwood forest, the boy waits at the appointed spot. He cannot see the grand assassin, but he can hear horses in the distance. The crown prince is fox hunting with his retinue and outing among sycophants. The boy shouts out a fox's warning call, a vixen's scream to draw the dogs. He throws his voice and steps behind a tree as the foxhounds bumble past him. The crown prince, whose horse is by far the fastest and whose friends dare not outpace him, is close behind with no other riders in sight. Something detaches itself from the undergrowth, and the crown prince falls from his saddle. He has time to low once in pain before the thing is on him. The now never king jerks, once then falls silent. The grand assassin is caked in mud. Only his still-water eyes are recognizable. They watch as the boy pulls off the crown prince's pinky ring. A knife touches the boy's throat. The grand assassin is saying something, but his words are cut short by the sound of approaching hooves. The knife vanishes. So does the crown prince's body, as the grand assassin pulls his prey into the undergrowth. With feline grace, the boy hops onto the crown prince's horse and turns to meet his retinue. Later that night, as fire burns away the memory of the decoy, the grand assassin will stare at the night sky. The stars will shimmer and merge into one bright light as the numbness in his fingertips creeps up his arm and seeps into his heart. That will be Arya's kiss, courtesy of Varos's coin, calling him home. The grand assassin won't curse the new crown prince, the future king, who would have owed him everything. No, he'll be too busy staring at the sky and trying to take flight. As for his words cut short in the woods, the new crown prince remembers them perfectly. Remember this moment, and you will. And what will the boy of many voices with only the tongueless to know his secret do? Well, some things are better left unsaid. The thumping. The museum's intercom crackled on with train station static. Hello, Norval Museum. I ducked at the sound, trying to escape it, cracking my eardrums. He spoke fast, like a sports announcer. at the most critical part of the game. Welcome to your nightly broadcast from your favorite night guard. As always, we must get the boring things out of the way before we have some fun. His voice trailed up and down with the meter of a radio host. It was well practiced. If there is any other human in this fine establishment other than your Steve and Linda, remember, you are stuffed. If there is anyone else here, you will be arrested, and you could be charged with robbery as you are on the premises 30 minutes after closing. He sounded way too excited for his long night shift. So, if there are any other living souls in this building, we get to start my favorite game. Hide and go, speak. I'll count to 30, and then the game starts. Have fun. I could hear the big generators for each light system shutting off, their cranks getting closer each time until the painting in front of me darkened. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light of the exit sign, his words started to set in my head. You will be arrested. I couldn't be arrested, not again, and especially not with robbery charges. Over the still air, a whistle was carried from deep within the museum. It tickled my ears with its swinging tune. With the lightest footsteps I could make, I reached the exit sign. Touching the cold metal made my hair stand on end as I gently pressed on the long bar until a loud click crashed through the room like a cymbal. The whistling stopped, and the silence became much louder. I looked around frantically, removing some of my precious light as my hair whipped around my face. If I was caught, I would have to look into my mother's eyes as she said, "I wouldn't be surprised if she did this, Judge." I couldn't hear that again. My eyes caught a big pot in the middle of the room. It was decorated with strips and little dancing people moving across the two-dimensional plane. As carefully as possible, I opened the lid and slipped my first leg into it. My footsteps sounded like a gong as I put my second in and slipped my body past the hole into the pot. Once the lid was over my head, I was in total darkness. Not even putting my hand in front of my face would give my eyes information. My breathing sounded like it was through a megaphone as it rose up and down, breathing in the clay, which was probably hundreds of years old. I tried to close my eyes, even though it changed nothing, and think about something other than where I was. The more I thought, the more my breathing sounded like it was coming from a tornado. My wind created gale force winds faster as I felt water drip onto my folded knees. My mind raced almost as fast. A thumping started to grow louder. At first, I thought it was from outside that he had found me. It kept getting faster, like he was running in place right outside my pot, teasing me with the promise of captivity, playing with me, just like his stupid voice played up and down like a carousel. I put a hand over my mouth to quiet my breath. Thump, 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 thump. Over and over, like an incessant heartbeat, his feet went up and down and up and down. For minutes, his feet went on, just right outside my pot. The drips on my knees were getting bigger and more frequent, adding another sound to my existence. At any moment, he could just open the lid and get this all over with, but he was choosing to mess with me. Thump drip, thump drip. Over and over, faster and faster. I couldn't control my breath, and what did it matter if he was going to torment me? He knew I was there. All he had to do was open the lid and let the red light in. Let it flood in and wash over my face like a river, rinse away the guilt for just a brief moment. Instead, he chose to mess with me. He chose to step and step just outside my reach. I could barely control myself. I started to rock back and forth, and with me, the pot. Thump, drip, clang. Thump, drip, clang. I couldn't do it again. I didn't want to do it again. But when if he opened that lid, I would have to. He deserved it for stepping over and over. His never-ending. Thump, thump, thump. My legs started to tingle with anticipation. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. My breath got faster as I stared at where I guessed the lid was. My pot rocked back and forth with me, getting ready for his fly-like hands to lift the lid. That's all he was, just a disgusting fly, but all he did was thump, thump, thump. I felt even more adrenaline burst through me as the rocking got faster, my breath got faster, and his shoes got faster. I have to. He'll get me if I don't. I have to. Rung through my head as the thump, thump, drip, thump, thump, clang rang on. A new sound sounded as a voice called out from the other side of the pot's walls. "Hey!" Another shot of adrenaline cracked open like lightning, and I could feel my legs practically vibrating from the sound. The thumping from his shoes meeting the hardwood floor, my breath at record-breaking speeds, the rocking only being contained by my leans, and drip dripping that reminded my legs to be ready. I want to do it again. I leaped out of the pot before his hand touched it. My head was buzzing with sounds, screams, thumps, tears, and then more screaming. Sounds of teeth on flesh and nails on muscle rang out throughout the silent museum like the most beautiful symphony. Thumps of bodies slamming on the ground, drips of ruby blood, and winds cut from hands swatting me away. I had done it again, and yet it did not go. Thump, 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 the Horseman. The man on the horse was an odd one. I could tell that even as he angled his quarter horse into my beams like it was his turn in the center ring. An Easterner, which maybe 10 years earlier might have seemed even odder. Little dressier than the average rancher, handled his animal like he knew how, but had learned it someplace else. "Saw you from the rise," the man said. Easterner, all right. Kind of horse-faced fellow with a government haircut and a big nose that reminded me of the Jew families that had passed through the dust and winds in Pop's tourist camp on their way to California. Not that I gave a damn. Pop hadn't given a shit about God after he took Ma in 32, and so he likewise didn't give two shits about anybody's private dealings with the Lord with or without Jesus. No, it was the man's eyes. Big, calm, curious. "Do you need some assistance?" My old Nash 400 was running like a top on 4 threadbare but plump tires, and the trunk was flung open with the jack still clamped into place. And then there was the Indian blanket I'd got in trade for some janitor work at the last gas before the next last gas on the way to my pot of gold that had turned into a cesspool about 2 hours ago. Oh, and the shovel lying next to the blanket rolled tight like a Tulsa oil man's stogie on the dirt under the lip of the trunk. Even without Jesus putting his 2 cents in, it wasn't the way I'd been raised. But like I said, it was the eyes, unblinking even in my headlamps. And that slow smile he gave me as I pulled Pop's old Colt out of my belt and made him a third eye, like I'd done him the biggest favor in the world. I'd settled in Espanola a couple years after the Depression ended, though, or maybe cause I'd helped the town undertaker put a number of such folks under the shifting Oklahoma topsoil for a few pennies a body. I'd sought out someplace a little more off the path of men, desperate or stupidly hopeful enough to drag their wives and young ones through the valley of death to a pot of gold that didn't exist. But everything shrinks as we grow, my pop once said, and it wasn't too long until they started to trickle south off the California Trail into the desert. College types, engineers, they said, Easterners, Jews, I heard, and more than a few foreigners who weren't fooling anybody with names like Henry Farmer and Nicholas Baker. Now, I'd never been out of Oklahoma before Pop's lungs finally gave out, and I dug one last grave this time for free, and I'd sure as shootin' never met any Germans. As at the time we had an axe to grind with Mr. Hitler, I was a sight more than nervous about the funny voices with the funny names sidling up beside me at the local watering hole on a Saturday night. Didn't help that the government had bought out the ranch school and put me out of the first steady work I'd had since sorting the dead from Pop's barely paying guests. The school and its high-flown Eastern teachers and rich folks' kids playing cowboy seemed a bit silly to me. But groundskeeper's pay was decent, and the Ponzes treated me right. Felt no desire to stick around afterwards, even with the new jobs the government and their engineers were bringing to the area. What the Easterners and foreigners specifically were doing may have been the best-kept secret in the Southwest, but the tighter you keep the lid on the pot, the bigger the mess when things boil over. All anybody could guess was it had something to do with that aforementioned scrap with Der Fuhrer, but folks got rattled with the army and the federal suits, cleverly watching every move the locals made. Bad enough, they were keeping Nazi prisoners and Japanese folks from California on ice down south at Fort Stanton. Seemed passing strange we weren't rounding up Germans and Italians who could blend right in at any military base or shipyard, but my 2 cents wasn't going to buy me anything but trouble, especially these days. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had ripped out the Chile line and pulled the tracks from Espanola in '42. But the town was hanging on between the nearby farms and the new government jobs 10 miles to the west. I was a handy sort with nowhere really to go, so I hung on too, in what passed for the middle of nowhere. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that's in the Old Testament, or maybe some tourist dropped that pearl on me on their way to the new promised land. As I now headed the opposite direction, back through Espanola and north past Taos into the mountains near the Colorado border, I could feel God's jeering presence. Poor time to get religion, with 2 bodies stuffed in the trunk and a ticket to hell waiting at the station for me. When I think about it, and believe you me, I have, maybe that's precisely the time. I put them deep in the Carson forest. It was a skill I thought I'd put behind me. But even the dead can surprise you. I was in my bed a few hours before dawn, contemplating and shivering on the bare mattress. It was sheep country. I could get a new blanket in the morning, though at this moment I wasn't sure of the need. Barring rattlers, the horse was the only one got off free that night. Hitler willingly gave up his ghost in the spring of '45, and his pal Mussolini got a date with a firing squad and a public showing strung up like the day's catch outside a Milan filling station. It took close to 3 more years to rein in Hirohito. After destroying the Japanese Navy and taking a string of Pacific islands, hemming the empire in nice and neat, we rained fire down on Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Fukuyama. I say we, although I spent most of my stint with the 124th Transportation Battalion in Luzon, up to my elbows in axle grease and sweat. I'd signed up 2 months after that night in the forest, reasoning only more blood would wash away what was on my hands and my soul. I was pretty much nobody in the middle of nowhere, and when no GIs or Eastern-looking fellows in suits and badges showed up on what passed for my doorsteps, I figured Uncle Sam had chalked things up to Nazi spies, or an unlucky turn on a dark plateau trail, or maybe Junior, as I'd come to call him, just bugging out. It was those goddamned eyes. He seemed like a man looking for a back door out of purgatory. Wonder if the sergeant at the Santa Fe recruiting office spotted anything like that in my bloodshot brown eyes. See, thing with being nobody, having nobody in the middle of nowhere is the company you're forced to keep. Nobody was ever likely to find the bodies, and nobody was likely ever going to spill a tear over the man who'd soiled my good blanket. But every time I listened to the bodies piling up on the radio, I wondered how many others I'd buried. Just what was it that midnight Horseman had been up to at the old ranch school, with his army of eggheads with phony names and their army keeping the whole town under wraps? And why did most of the lot just pull up stakes a few weeks after? Had to be some kind of secret weapon, blow the Krauts and the Japs off the map, my guess? For one bleary moment, I thought my brain had contracted TB and an Irish brogue, but it was one of the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Gandy dancers who'd lost a knee and his toes and the works in between to a 3 p.m. coal car maybe 15 years ago. It hadn't broke him of the whiskey. He read too many of those cheap detective magazines with the gumshoes and masked crusaders and flying saucers and half-naked women about to be sawed up, or worse, and I'd had my wits about me. I'd have heard him creaking down the planks and cleared my stool. "And what makes you think that?" I asked, 'cause it was the noise I needed. "My sister's boy. He does some plumbing and odd jobs for them mad scientists down the road," the old man wheezed. "Seems like everybody's in an uproar over the boss fella gone missing a few weeks back. Seem to think there's spies all about, Nazis or commies or some such. Young Danny happened down the wrong hall, and the soldier boys there grilled him near to medium well." "Boss?" My voice went up a couple notches, but he was too stewed to notice. "Some Jew scientist from California supposed to be grand muck-a-muck of the whole operation. Jingleheimer, Weisenheimer, something like that. Some of the talk is, this Jew might be the spy." He leaned in on the half-leg and grabbed my sleeve as a thick cloud of coffin varnish sent me reeling back. "Now, you think about it, boyo. Why you think every man-jack's knickers are in such a knot, lest something big was in the works? You ever hear of atoms? You know, the stuff what we're all of us made of? Well, I hear tell Hitler and his boys have found a way to split them atoms, to just rip all of creation apart. Unless we get there first and blow the fella to hell first, little wonder them Nazis would want to rub out Dr. Jingleheimer." He then toppled from his stool. I caught him halfway to the floor, jostled him back into place, and made for the door. Crisp desert night outside, the moon too close and stars scattered across the black, nothing like atoms torn asunder. I jumped in the Nash, somehow made it alive back to my shack, and packed for my penance. Recently leaked revelations allege the U.S. Defense and State Departments largely falsified published reports that Nazi Germany and Russia were on the verge of harnessing atomic fission as a potential weapon against America and its European allies, purportedly to spur Allied physicists to escalate development of such an atomic bomb to bring about a speedier surrender by Hitler's forces. That effort, referred to as the Manhattan Project, was conducted under a nearly impenetrable cloak of military security on the site of a former boys' academy near Los Alamos, under the auspices of preeminent theoretical physician J. Robert Oppenheimer. Without revealing the nature of his work, Oppenheimer's mysterious disappearance late one night in 1944 sparked a massive manhunt, and rumors the eccentric scientist had collaborated either with the Germans or the Russians, given his wife and brother's ties to the American Communist Party. The case remains open to this day, and the Manhattan Project ended shortly after Adolf Hitler's suicide and the effective fall of his Nazi regime. Amid the loss of one of its most brilliant minds and fears of further security breaches, the remaining physicists of Los Alamos declared the project a failure. Or so we thought. I talked this week with Isidore Isaac Rabi and David L. Hill, former Manhattan Project researcher. In a 60 Minutes exclusive, Rabi and Hill reveal for the first time that they and other project scientists concerned about the long-range implications of atomic warfare conspired to conceal their findings from the military. Rabi, Dr. Oppenheimer himself voiced doubts about the sanity of releasing such a force into the world, but he was under intense pressure to beat Hitler, beat Stalin to the punch. None of us knew we alone held the keys to a Pandora's box, but without Robert's zeal, we reached a hard but crucial decision. There are questions which illuminate, and there are those that destroy. I was always taught to ask the first kind. The only answer to the question of the day was destruction. If not merely the instantaneous vaporization of entire cities and the then unquantified after effects of ambient radiation, then the geopolitical stranglehold and atomic arms race between the US, Russia, perhaps even the former People's Republic of China would impose upon the human race. And imagine if such a weapon were deployed. There would be no defense, no deterrence, only annihilation. Robbie was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize for his discovery of nuclear magnetic resonance, a major breakthrough in medical imaging and diagnosis, and his work in microwave technology revolutionized military and commercial radar systems and led to the introduction of the home microwave oven in the mid-1950s. Meanwhile, following the dissolution of the Manhattan Project, project team member David Hill headed up the Federation of American Scientists, later to become the Global Federation of Responsible Scientists, with the overthrow of Joseph Stalin and subsequent collapse of communism across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Northern China. Under Hill's leadership, the Federation worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and other international agencies to design virtually fail-safe atomic reactors, which have all but replaced coal-fired power facilities and have been credited with greatly reducing air pollution around the planet. We reached Dr. Hill at his Santa Fe home. Hill continues to defend Oppenheimer's patriotism and loyalty, as he has since President Truman branded the missing physicist a traitor in league with communist factions. Hill. The consensus was that the specter of atomic warfare and destruction would come to eclipse any prospect of science in the public interest. We've harnessed the power of the atom to save lives and provide clean, safe energy. I posit we'd never have put men and women on Mars, nor developed a seamless worldwide web of satellite communications and technology, had we created a world occupied solely with averting global apocalypse. Wallace. Not everyone concurs with your assessment. Retired Major General Boris Posh, who headed up the investigation into Oppenheimer's disappearance in 1944, argues you and your colleagues withheld vital scientific information that might have ended the war 4 to 5 years earlier, saving, in his words, countless American and civilian Japanese lives. And to this day, Posh believes Oppenheimer was complicit either in your deception or acts of espionage. He's pushing the Justice Department to bring formal charges against what he called the Manhattan conspirators. Your response? Hill. Mr. Wallace, I'd invite you to imagine a football stadium filled to the rafters with all those American, British, Australian, Russian, Japanese casualties. Then imagine dropping a bomb that would wipe out an area 5, 10, 100 miles around that stadium. Then look ahead at the radioactive wastes that would linger in the air above that area for months, possibly years, that might carry across 100, possibly thousands of miles. Multiply that by as many bombs as it might take to prove we mean business. As for Dr. Oppenheimer, you have to understand the exhaustion and stress we were all under. Robert's way of dealing with that pressure, his doubts about the work and its consequences, was to ride the mountain trails around Los Alamos, through the Sangre de Cristo and the Jemez mountain ranges. He loved New Mexico, and he loved his horses. We were on the verge of a key breakthrough at that point, and he vanished shortly after supper. Most of us knew where he'd probably gone, and when they found his horse wandering around the plateau about 3 miles off, we figured he'd met up with some kind of misadventure. Dr. Oppenheimer would never have let that animal to languish in the wilds. That was something General Groves and his men would never understand. It was a small item on the Sunday news feed, but the Tao's byline had caught my eye. A massive flash flood had uncovered, and a trio of hikers had discovered what looked to be the skeletal remains of 2 adult males, one wrapped in the shreds of a decomposed wool blanket. A couple ribs shattered by one bullet, another bullet found rattling around in his companion's punctured skull. They'll surprise you, all right. And with them, the rest comes surging back. The soldiers, the flyers, the privates and colonels and generals, the moms and dads and sons and daughters caught in the Spitfire, the moms and dads and sons and daughters snared in limbo, merely for being the face of the enemy, or a fair enough approximation. The odd horseman, with the tortured eyes who'd suffered such indignity and injustice for taking a midnight ride. I'd taken a single souvenir that night in the forest, secreted it away to the Pacific on the second Great California Migration to find that golden pot in the airplane plants and the aeronautics trade, tucked it in a bedroom drawer through a marriage, 2 sons, a funeral, and 2 graduations, buried it deep packing for that one final job far, but not far enough away. Now, it seemed, was the time. It had been a tough week in the field, and I'd hoped to catch the satellite feed of 60 Minutes and maybe Columbo, but this finally seemed the time. I set the yellowing badge, number 76, I guessed how the brass kept track of their college boys, on top of the TV monitor, trying not to look in those damnably damned eyes this time. Bye, JR. Then I wrote this for you, whoever you wind up being. You can see the right people get it. Then I think I'll step out for a bit of air. The desert is beautiful at night, especially in the high beams of a double moon, book of ours. Manuscripts are from the devil, I'd been told, but I felt it too. Evil emanating out like heat from a fire. I wrapped it in cloth to be safe, tucked it in my satchel, and now I wait. I had a few hours, enough time, I'm sure, before my master discovered my absence and my theft. I drank my beer down to forget the past, to focus on my future, my hope brightening the walls of the dark public house. My eyes followed Evelyn as she moved around me, cleaning up from the night before. Her dark hair pulled back tight showed her pale beauty, and even the dull woolen uniform couldn't diminish her lithe figure. I lifted my head in an attempt to catch her eye, but no, that candle had guttered out, only the smoke of my longing left. When she first came to town, she spoke to me, asked about my work and my master, but her attention had drifted when I said no. Now I was no more than another chair in her way, an obstacle to sweep around. I did this for you, Evelyn, and you won't even look at me? On my own, I see. So be it. Pulling out the cloth-wrapped bundle from my satchel, I carefully placed it on the table. If what Evelyn said was true, this strange item could allow me to finally escape my service, with enough gold to make a new life, free from my bonds. I stared at it, hesitant to touch the elaborate box. Just parchment squeezed tight between wooden boards. How could it hurt me? I had seen it before on my master's shelf, next to an old statue, but gave it no more thought than the worn boots below it. I have no need of such things as paper or written symbols. My only use is for work. Evelyn said a man, Demon, had come from Rome searching for these old manuscripts, such as one rumored to be held by my own master. No larger than my two hands together, this small item could be my salvation. The cover creaked open, dust puffed into the air, as if breathing again after ages of suffocation. First one page, then the next blank. My heart leapt into my throat. Could some magic be needed to make the words appear? But then, on the third sheet, an image appeared. A man so bright and real. I touched the page to see if he lived. I understood why Demon wanted this, needed it enough to pay gold for it. The man, his hands raised with blood on his palms, a cut in his ribs, stared at me. A gold circle around his head, a gold cloak over his body. Was this the man whose soul had been caught? Half the page and the next were filled with black marks in dense flowing lines. They seemed to move as I looked over them, as if these lines were fighting to be released from the page. A black dread flowed down my back. Have I released some demon by opening his cage? My blunt and scarred fingers moved along each, following these strange markings. A hand on my shoulder. You did it. I turned to see Evelyn behind me. I hoped you wouldn't. What? My confusion intensified when she looked down into my eyes. Deep pools of sadness. If this goes well, I'll have gold. My lips quivered, matching the tremor of my heart. We can leave together. Poor boy. Her hand touched my face. The blaze in her eyes lit a fire in me, illuminating a future better than I could dream. I wish it could be so. Her eyes closed. Yes, if after, meet me outside. I grabbed her hand, kissed her fingers. We'll leave this town together and live free. Evelyn bent down. Her lips met mine, just an instant. Her warm touch an eternity of bliss, sparking lighting through to my toes. Then she looked up at a sound and stepped away. The door stuttered open, and a man spilled in with the morning light. I felt Demon before I could see his face, a cold frost flowing into the room. A narrow stick of a man. His over-large head bobbed on a narrow neck, hair fine, matted to his temples, with a few strips reaching down his jaw. He clutched his cloak to his chest with thin arms, like crooked branches. Glasses perched at the end of his long, pointed nose, a sparrow hanging on for dear life. He moved without effort, as if he floated instead of walked. Demon nodded to Evelyn, waved toward her with 2 fingers. Dark, cold spots of light peered out under heavy brows, eyes like a wild beast with no soul, and I feared him like no other man I had ever met. He smelled of mold and dust, an odor of death that sent the hair on my neck lurching from my body to escape. Long, thin fingers danced on the table, blackened nails clicking against the wood. I had heard of these scribes, men who trapped words on a page with strange magic and a feather. What mysticism did they practice? What knowledge did they deal in beyond my ken? I eyed him warily. That knowledge stuffed too tight, a too full sack could explode, destroying him and anyone around him. Do you have the gold? I whispered, keeping my head low. A cough, dry and hoarse, escaped his lips, like a death rattle. I feared for his health, but at his crooked grin, I recognized it as his laugh. Evelyn brought 2 ceramic cups of black beer, along with a metal platter laden with apples, dried meat, and cheeses. Demon's hand brushed her leg, up to her hip, lingering. I didn't understand how she could stand the touch, but her body stayed still, though her eyes looked away. See, I have the monette. Demon's face fell into a sneer. His words had a strange, foreign lilt that grated on my ears. A cloth bag landed with a heavy clink on the table, the sound of my future. Evelyn had spoken the truth. I suddenly saw our life together, our horses in the green pasture, prancing in front of golden fields of wheat. Evelyn stood at my side, holding a draft of beer for me and my pipe. Our young children laughing around us. I tried to count their little heads. Were there 8 or 10? "You have il manoscrito?" Demon interrupted. I looked around the empty room before I placed the bundle on the table. I felt lighter having passed it on. His hands paused in midair when the cloth fell away. The old man breathed in, his eyes bright, his back straightening up. His mouth dropped open in pure desire. Demon moved to open the cover. I grabbed his wrist, felt his bones in my hand, his skin cold as ice. Alive, though, his pulse beat thin and fast. "Be careful. The man, he's awake." "Questo è il mio lavoro." Demon spoke, low and dry as a desert wind. "This is my life's work." I knew enough to know that these lines signified words, somehow. The man in gold's voice trapped on this parchment. I sunk down further in my chair, weighed down by the pain of slavery. I knew what it meant to be under lock and key, allowed to be free only on the whim of my master. Demon meant to keep these words locked away, to add to his collection of souls. Better them than me. "Mio Dio il Horai," he said. "The Book of Hours." The rumors spoke true. We thought lost. "Is it what you're looking for?" I focused on reading Demon's blank face. He didn't answer, but continued to lift page after page, each turn showing the same, more and more black snakes squirming under my eyes. I had no idea what thoughts these little lines captured, but I didn't want to understand. I felt the beer roil in my stomach, threatening to come back up. The man of gold had been trapped onto these papers, imprisoned forever, with this foreigner to be the jailer. "Pay me or I'll burn the vile thing." Demon's knife flashed, a blur of steel, and then a sharp line of heat at my neck. Demon held me, with death at my throat. "I'll take this as a gift. Or will you trade with your blood?" A swipe of his wrist, and I would leave this life, damned to hell for eternity. I should have read the signs. They were as clear as day, the offer too good to be true. I'd been betrayed. Slam! The door flew open and my master stood in the door, his stance unmistakable, his rage shaking him, and the sword dancing in his hand. "Boy!" my master shouted. "How could you betray me? Steal from me!" The blade lowered, pointing an accusation at me. "Cos'è questo?" Demon shouted to my master. "I didn't know he stole. He will be punished." I thought of Evelyn, our life together. I couldn't go out like this. "Please, no, help me." Suddenly, the manuscript moved, falling to the floor, catching Demon's attention, loosening his grip. I'll never know if it was a quirk of fate, or if the man in gold chose to help me, but I took the chance and grabbed the knife by the blade to pull it from my neck. I escaped his grasp, though my palms were sliced to shreds. I turned to see Eve wielding the platter like a hammer, swinging again and again at Demon. With Evelyn at my side, I could make an escape. Scooping up the manuscript, I grabbed an iron poker from the fire and ran at my master, standing in front of the only portal to my future. I had lived more of life in these few short hours than in all of my 20 years. I kissed a girl, escaped death, and now carry a priceless treasure in my hand. The stars were aligned with me today. I could not lose. Anger at all the scars, all the pain this man caused powered my arm. I swung my war axe for a killing blow to his head. My master took a simple step, dodged my weapon, and I felt his blade in my side. "I'm invincible!" I screamed as I fell out the front door, the manuscript tumbling from my hand. If only I could find my love, Evelyn, then we can meet our future together. I looked at my hands, covered in blood, my life pouring out of my side. As I fell, a flash of recognition. The man in gold. I opened my eyes to see Evelyn above me, her face more beautiful than anything I deserve. Is this heaven? No, not yet, she said. Soon enough. She picked up the manuscript from the ground. That, I gestured to it. The man in gold, he needs to be set free, I said, out of breath. That devil will take him. Men are the devil. I learned that where I was raised in the monastery, as a servant, and then her jaw clenched. A brother taught me my letters. Now I work for Demon. My world is small and hard. But when I open this, read these words, I release the spirit, and I escape this life, even if only for a few moments. Do you believe? He saved me. I closed my eyes. I saw the horses in the green pasture, golden fields of wheat. The man in gold stood with me as Evelyn read to us, her words flowing on a breeze. I am finally free. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and rescues them from all their troubles. Easy money. Debbie said that it was lucky for us that the weather would make for fewer people on the roads, less chance we'd be seen. 25 freaking degrees. I do not like the cold. This will be the first time I've ever done anything with Randy. This thing was his idea, I think, but it was Debbie that brought me into it. There's $6,000 to be had, and it sounds like no problem having it, if you don't mind robbing some old lady, which I don't. This weather is awful, though. They're always predicting snow, but we don't usually get any. When we do get it, it's pretty, covering up the trash on the ground, making the town look better than it really is. So, Debbie told me about this, and then has Randy tell me the details. We're planning on tricking this old lady, but they don't really have a handle on how to do it. We're going to tell her they're from the city, tell her they need to look inside her house. Randy looks like a teenager, and Debbie's a girl. They need me to be the man from the city. I told them I had a blue shirt with badges on it. It had belonged to my brother Danny, who's doing time in the state penitentiary, back when he worked for the city. I've got his van, too, and it's plain white like a service vehicle. Debbie was Danny's girlfriend before he got locked up. Now she's Randy's. She ought to be my girlfriend because I'm a lot more like Danny than Randy will ever be. But I get it. Randy is smart, and Debbie wanted somebody who was not like Danny. So, we got this plan. It's Randy's plan, but we're all in on it. I have a gun. It's a gun Uncle Terrell gave me when I was a kid. It's a .22, but it works. Randy said not to bring it, but I really want to have it with me. You can never tell what might go wrong. What if this old lady has a gun? Did he ever think about that? So, I got the shirt and my van. We got what we need. This morning, we went back over what to do. We go to the old lady's house at a little after 12. Traffic in town is busy, but this place is outside of town. It's on a street that zigzags off from the highway toward Atlanta. I drive up in front of the house, parking so that she can see the white van if she looks out the window. I get out and go up to the door with Debbie behind me. Debbie is going to be wearing a big coat, and I'm going to say she's my trainee. First, though, I have to tell the old lady that there's been a problem with her electric bill and that she's being charged too much. The city is sending me to fix it. I'm gonna tell her. She opens the door, because who wouldn't want somebody to fix it so that a bill is lower? And that's when I tell her who Debbie is supposed to be. I'm asking the old lady where the kitchen is, because this problem is probably at the outlet the refrigerator is plugged into. When she starts to take me there, Debbie asks if she can use the bathroom. While I'm in the kitchen, Debbie goes to the old lady's bedroom. Randy says the money is in the bottom drawer of her chest of drawers. I keep the old lady busy till Debbie comes to the kitchen. Then I make like I fixed the problem, and we leave. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The old lady won't know she's been robbed. The next time she looks for the money and it's gone, she won't think that it might have been the city electric guy. She's old. If she does remember us, she sure as hell won't remember what we looked like. Randy says there's about $6,000 there. I'm like, how do you know? He says the old lady is Dexter Lockwood's granny, and Dexter told him. We gotta give Dexter some of the money? Randy says no, that Dexter is stupid, and just told this without thinking up the plan himself. Randy is staying in the van while Debbie and me go inside. With the weather as cold as it is, it wouldn't be a good idea to turn the thing off and just hope it will start when we get back. It's usually reliable, but in this weather, I don't know. I'm leaving it running with Randy inside, out of sight. And damn, it is snowing. So, I drive a little slower on the way, looking around to see how many cars are out, and since the snow just started, there's quite a few. We get to the house and it's not what I was expecting. I thought it would be something pretty nice, but it's not. It's a little bit bigger than the shotgun houses in Milltown, but not by much. There's a carport full of junk, and the Plymouth in the driveway looks like it hasn't moved in a while. I asked Randy if he was sure this was the place, and he said that he was. I parked on the street and looked over at Debbie. She's a pretty girl, but the kind of pretty girl that knows she's pretty. The coat she was wearing had a fur collar that she pulled up to cover a good bit of her face. She said, "Here we go." Part 2. Debbie. When Steve pulled up in front of the house, I could tell that he was scared, and it wasn't just because of the snow. He was dim in the head like his brother Dennis, but Dennis wasn't scared of anything. That's why he was locked up. A little bit of scared can be a good thing. It keeps you from being foolish. Randy and I had gone over the plan a good bit before we got Steve involved. He had the shirt and the plain white van. He was too dumb to send in alone. Somebody needed to go with him to be sure he didn't screw it up. While we're going over the plan, Steve started talking about having a gun he wanted to bring with him. Randy said no. A gun would change all of this. We would go from basically pulling a scam to maybe getting charged with assault with a deadly weapon of an old lady. I'm scared that Steve brought it anyhow. So, it's below freezing, and the snow has started to stick. I didn't say anything though. We needed to be focused on what we were doing, because this was $6,000. $2,000 for each of us. I could last 6 months on $2,000 if I was careful. And I was careful. I'm not mentioning that until we get this done. I want my money, and then I'm done with Randy, and with Steve, and with Dennis. When he stopped the van in front of the house, I could see Steve starting to freak out a little. I didn't want him to spend too much time thinking, so I just looked at him and said, "Here we go." I got out of the van and started around. Randy got in the driver's seat. We went to the door and knocked. The old lady opened it right away, like she had been standing there waiting for us. She's tiny. I mean, I'm only 5'2" myself, but she's shorter than me. A tiny little old lady. "Can I help you?" Steve stutters a little, but manages to say, "We're here about your bill. Has it been too high lately?" "What bill?" she says. "The electric bill," he says. "Has your electric bill been too high?" "It's high," the old woman says, just like any other old woman would have said about any other bill. The old lady is tiny, but she's mad, staring at him right in the eye. "Let me come to your kitchen." Steve says. I can show you what the problem is. I need to go to the bathroom, I say, but the old lady doesn't hear me. The old lady looks at me and says, they got to send 2 of you to look at it? Steve is in over his head. Let me come to your kitchen, he says. The old lady's hackles are up big time, and I can see she's not scared. She knows we're trouble, and she's not going to let us in. I say again, I need to go to the bathroom. I can show you where the problem is, and I can fix it and save you some money, Steve says, and he sounds desperate saying it. I could see where this was heading. She would slam the door and call the police, and even if we didn't get caught, there wouldn't be any money. That was for damned sure. I shoved past Steve and pushed the old lady backwards. I thought she would fall, but she didn't. She staggered a step, and I was inside. I spun her around and pushed her face first into the sofa. I didn't want her looking at us any more than she already had. I could hear Steve snatching drawers open in the next room. I'm thinking the jerk doesn't remember where the money is. Randy had said specifically that it was in the bottom drawer in a cardboard box under some old nightgowns. Why the hell could he not find it? I hear him cussing then. He comes out and says, Debbie, you're going to have to come and look for it. I can't find it. Idiot! Names! Now the old lady knew my name at very least. By then he was beside me, leaning into the old woman himself, holding her there. I got up and went to the bedroom and saw that he had ransacked it. The room straight across the hall was a little bathroom. There was one other door still closed. I went to it. I opened the door, expecting to find a different bedroom, the right bedroom, but instead, it's piled high with boxes and crap. Her junk room. Damn it, I said. I went back to the front room where Steve continued to hold the old lady down. I leaned down to her and said, Where is your money? I don't have any money, she said. Steve started to let her up, and it made me so mad that I slapped his head. He leaned back into her. You do. We know about it. It's supposed to be in the bottom drawer of your Chester drawers in a box. Now where is it? She said, My Christmas money? Yeah, I said, wondering if she thought we wouldn't take it if she called it that. It's gone. I spent it. Now I was mad. How did Randy get such bad information? What the hell were we going to do now? Finally, I said, You must have started saving up again for next Christmas. Where's that at? In my sewing room, she said. I didn't say anything to that. The sewing room, she said. I heard you opening doors. I know you went in there. The room with the boxes? Yeah, I keep it in one of the boxes in there. Which one? She started describing where it was, but I thought there was no way I was going to go in there and find it, even with her description. There was crap everywhere in that room. Bring her down here, Jeff, I said, heading down the hall and expecting Steve to understand that I was referring to him. Again, it took 2 beats for him to catch on. He held the old woman by the back of her neck, pushing her in front of him. I pulled my coat up high enough that she couldn't get a good look at my face. When she got inside the room, she went to a stack of boxes and moved them around, finally pulling out one that looked, to me at least, like every other box in the room. She fumbled and opened it as we stood behind her. Part 3. Randy. There was supposed to be $6,000 in the box. If anything, I thought there might be more. I told Debbie about it, hoping she could talk Steve into doing the actual theft. Her idea was better because she knew about the official-looking shirt. I didn't want to deal with Steve. He was stupid. This needed to be simple, not simple-minded. Debbie planned it well. None of us knew how the weather would be that day. The temperature had been around freezing for a few days. Then it dropped into the 20s, and then it started to snow. I thought about calling it off, but I didn't want to lose Steve. We could do this. Debbie had Steve practice everything he was going to say and do. She walked him through it over and over, until we were all bored to death by it. The main thing was to say he was from the city, and that there was a problem with the electricity, and he could fix it and save her money. Once they were inside, the whole thing would take 2 or 3 minutes. I thought the shirt would be enough to make Steve look like a utility worker. It wasn't. He looked like a doofus wearing a work shirt. It was too late for me to say anything to him or Debbie. We were committed to the plan by then. I looked at him and wanted to ask if he had brought his little gun with him, but I didn't. I just wanted to hurry and get this over with. When we got there, Steve is like a raccoon caught in a car's headlights, and I think, damn, we are done for. I thought about pulling the plug, but I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. Debbie came through, getting him out of the van and headed toward the house. I watched them till they got to the door, and I realized how much snow had fallen. Maybe 5 minutes passed before I heard the gunshot. That son of a bitch had brought a gun after I told him not to. He fired again, and I thought, dumb bastard has killed her. I was already out of the van, which I had left running and with the door open, and was running toward the house. I can hear Debbie crying, and I know it's because she just watched that fool kill the old woman. The door pops open and Debbie comes staggering out, doubled over. I grab her shoulders and raise her up. There is a widening red patch at her stomach that I don't want to look at too closely. I put my arm under her and help her to the van. I can't very well drive her to the hospital and explain that our partner accidentally shot her while we were robbing an old lady. And I can't walk away from that situation either, I realize. I opened the side door and laid her down. This is messed up, I said. She didn't say anything back. I ran back to the little house, knowing that neighbors might have heard the gunshots and called the police. I needed to get Steve and the money and get the hell away and figure out what we needed to do about Debbie. I didn't want to see the dead old lady. I didn't. As soon as I got inside, I yelled, "Steve!" There was no answer. I went down the little hall and looked in the bedroom, but no one was there. I started into the junk room, but I fell, slipping in blood on the floor. My feet slid from under me, and I went down hard, banging my head on the floor. Someone spoke my name. I turned my head and saw Steve lying on the floor beside me. Blood throbbed slowly from his neck. He was not dead, but he would be soon. I heard my name again and looked up to see the old woman standing above me, her face filled with anger and sadness. "Randy," she said. Then I saw that she was holding the old Colt pistol that had belonged to my grandfather. I didn't realize she still had it. I should have, but I didn't. "Hey, Grandma," I said, "you have no idea what you are getting into. I am no saint, but no one really is. Some people are less evil. Some people are more evil. I have done things I am not proud of, and will have to live with the consequences once they come. I do, however, refuse to feel guilt for what I have done. There are reasons behind my actions, and no one will convince me they are not for the greater good. I am writing here in my diary to be able to get it off my chest, as I cannot speak to anyone about it. I wish I could scream it from the top of my lungs, but I can't. If the secret comes out, it probably will be huge. The local media are already talking about it, and when they catch whoever did it, it will be loud. In my mind, I am a hero, but in people's eyes, I will not be. If anyone is reading this, probably after I have been caught, know this. I refuse to feel bad about it. I meant what I did every time. My heart is pounding with excitement, but I close my notebook and rest my head on the wall behind me. I've been doing my assignments for over a year already, but even thinking about them makes my heart race. It gives me rush, flushes my cheeks, and keeps me motivated to keep going. I love everything about it. I look at the time on my watch and get off the bed. Time for my double shift at the bar. I put on one of my tightest blouses with low cleavage, comfortable jeans, and tie my hair in half up, half down style. Touch of lipstick, mascara, shoes, and I am ready to go. As I walk out of the house, I feel the cold breeze tickle my skin and I shiver. I hate cold. As fast as I can, I lock the door and rush to the car. When I arrive at the bar, there are quite a few customers in already, even though it is only 5 p.m. I drop my bag off at my locker and wash my hands before I walk out to the main room. The music isn't very loud yet, thankfully. The outside daylight is still shining through, ruining the night out vibe, and people are divided between drinking coffees or beers. No spirits in their hands just yet. I make small talk with the colleague I'm taking over from before they leave, and I make my way to the right side of the bar to check if all fruits and garnishes are restocked and ready for the night. For those who never worked at a bar, they never are after a day shift. I slice lemons and oranges, moving on to the limes, when I hear the sound of a metal knocking gently on the polished wooden bar. I look up and immediately smile. My partner in crime is here. She is the most gorgeous woman I have ever met. Has long, curly black hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile I could not stop thinking about. I pour her a whiskey on the rocks and without a word, let her casually look around for the first 10 minutes. "Is your cockroach here already?" I ask, and she shakes her head. "I don't expect him here so early," she replies with a soft sigh. "Besides, I wanted to give you some attention before I see him." I smile and roll my eyes. "Lizzie, keep your flirting skills for the boys. I know what a sneaky little snake you are." She laughs at my joke, but doesn't reply. "How did you meet this one?" She grabs her glass and swirls it around, watching the almost melted ice cubes float in circles. "I accidentally bumped into him at the grocery store, very conveniently wearing one of my cutest dresses. We have been chatting on my fake phone for a week now. And he is definitely the one that did it?" I almost whisper, leaning closer towards her face. "Yes, Polly. He did do all of those unspeakable things to that girl a year ago." She whispers back, and I can smell the whiskey coming from her breath. "Then his rich daddy hired a lawyer, paid off some of the important people, and the cockroach is enjoying his life." She puts the glass down and straightens back in her chair. Not for long, though. We make small talk as the time goes, in between me serving customers until about 6 p.m. when the cockroach walks in. He is a tall man with brown, messy hair, sharp jawline, and dressed nicely in some expensive clothes. I can't tell you what brand they are because I know nothing about it, but the way he wears them with cockiness, I can tell he spent money. His dad's money, I remind myself, and continue wiping the already clean bar, trying to make myself look busy. Liz gets up from her chair, greets him with a kiss on the cheek, and sits back down in front of me. They order a round of drinks, and she starts to work her magic. They spend hours on chatting and laughing, although I know Liz is faking it. She always does. When the clock strikes 9 p.m. and her date is pretty tipsy, they order the next round of drinks. I make them and turn my back to the camera to grab the lemon off the cutting board with the pill between it and my finger, and I drop it in his drink. When he starts talking incoherently, Liz grabs his arm and quietly walks him out of the bar. I wait a few minutes before I ask my colleague to look after the bar as I need a quick break and leave as well. I find them in a back alley, the cockroach sitting sloppily on the floor, resting his back and head on the wall, and Liz standing above him, looking at her phone. As soon as I walk up to them, she looks up. I spoke to his victim. The girl was still so upset about what happened. She whispers, with anger in her eyes. This piece of... He took something away from her she will never get back. He deserves what is coming his way. I don't reply, but nod in agreement. I look at the guy's face and feel disgusted that he not only felt it was okay to do what he did, but also decided consequences are not for him to handle. My stomach feels tight, something heavy like rocks growing inside it. I am not sure if it is from nerves, stress, disgust, or excitement from what is coming. It is Liz's time to deal with the man, and I need to get back to work soon enough. I help her tie his hands and feet, put him in the boot of the rented car, and turn to Liz. He should have admitted and faced the punishment, I hear Liz say as she slowly walks towards the driver's door. She isn't looking at me, and I am not sure if she is talking to herself or me. He is a gross, creepy cockroach who has done something horrible and he needs to pay. The smug smile he had on his face when the case was dismissed, knowing he got away with it. I see her shake her head in the streetlight falling on her from above. Well, he didn't. They don't anymore. I whisper back and walk into the bar. HIM. I can feel the headache getting worse as the shouts don't end. Mr. Robertson came to report his son's missing, but ever since we took all the information and said we will look into it, he has been shouting at various officers. He wanted the whole station up at this moment and searching for his son. We tried explaining to him that we will not be able to find him within the next hour, so when he kept shouting, we threw him out, threatening with a ticket. I spin around in my chair to look at the cork board again, but feel hopeless. Missing men keep being added to it, but no more clues have been discovered. I feel like a complete idiot. Ryder Robertson's picture have now been added to the right side of the board, alongside Henry's, Lewis's, Christian's, and Jake's. All of these men, various ages, occupations, and lives, have been missing, and it was my job to find them. I hear someone walking up to my desk, and I turn to see my partner Jesse. I could put an egg on your head and would be able to fry it within a minute, he says and smiles at his joke, but I don't smile back. I am too tense. Hey, I know it is hard, but with a new victim, there is a possibility for potential clues. I nod without saying anything and turn back to the board. Maybe walk me through what connects these men. Sometimes speaking things out loud helps to see things that could have been missed. I sigh but agree, for the sake of not having any other ideas. Henry, aged 54, went missing in April 2023. In February 2023, he was found not guilty for domestic violence on his wife. Lewis, aged 22, missing in July 2023. There was an old report to the police about attacking his ex-girlfriend, but she came back to retract the report, saying they just argued and she was okay. Chris went missing only a week after Lewis. They are the same age. I don't, however, have anything that links him to the rest of the guys, so maybe he is not part of it. Jake, aged 32, went missing in December 2023. Only 3 months after his lawyer argued that 5 women that came forward from his company about inappropriate behavior towards them were unstable emotionally and had a vendetta against him. So the case was dismissed. And now, we have Ryder, who a year ago assaulted a girl, but somehow the DNA samples the doctors collected disappeared right before the trial. All of them have been seen with a woman at a bar the night before they went missing. So, the only thing that connects these men are vile actions against women. What if the women did it? I laugh and roll my eyes. Yes, because the experienced detective didn't think of that. I will check with the girl from Ryder's case, but all others have rock-stone alibis. I pinch the bridge of my nose with my fingers and rub it, trying to get rid of the headache. Soon enough, this case will be assigned to someone else, since I can't seem to get any leads. And this would be an absolute nightmare for a young, ambitious detective like me. I needed to get at least something to keep me going. "I think you need a drink," Jesse says, and I look at him from under my eyebrows. "When we're done tonight, we are going out. And," he says quickly, raising his finger to stop me from interrupting. I will not take no for an answer. So here I am now, at the bar, sipping my beer and listening to Jesse vent about the argument with his girlfriend. I politely nod, but only listen to every third word, because the focus is escaping me too quickly. I love him like a brother, but help me God with how much he talks. I look around the bar, trying to look casual, but the moment my eyes land on her, there is nothing casual about me. She walks in with her long strawberry blonde hair, gorgeous black dress, and boots heeled so high, I am surprised she isn't falling every second step. But she has this confident aura about her. She has her head held high like she owns this bar, and I am mesmerized. Jesse notices that because he stops talking and nudges me with his elbow. "Go, speak to her," he says with a smirk. "Undust your flirting techniques, wipe the cobwebs, and go." And so I do. I get up, still holding my drink, and sit down next to her at the bar. "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" I ask, and she turns, looking at me with big brown eyes. She smiles. "Of course not." She answers softly. "My name is Polly." "Alex," I say, and shake her hand. "Let me buy you a drink, Polly, if that's okay." Trial by Egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench, bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. "This should be the final day of the trial," Judge Brybar said after customarily clearing his throat. "If Miss Tottle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go?" He flashed a smile at the defendant. "An hour should do it." Marissa Tottle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but, for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. "Excellent," the judge said. "That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last." The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towtle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towtle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal, and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towtle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con. She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert. And most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towtle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial. But she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar. So she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Towtle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication." Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, She was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. "Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense. Such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury?" "It is, if there's no objection from the prosecution." This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her. And it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. "No objection," Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to. Not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? Ha! And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place than another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves, not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary, sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. Control yourself, the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. I kindly ask you to back away, the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air. Once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have... Approach, Your Honor? Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, Approach, Your Honor. Your gavel. She has your gavel in her sleeve. The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily. But the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training, and there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail, whose expression almost never changed, her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship, as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe, son of Satan. I awoke to a bright light streaming through a crack in one of the wooden boards I had put up in a paranoid, booze-infused haze. It was June, and the heat was stifling. My mouth was the kind of dry where your cheeks and lips stick to your teeth, the leftover taste of alcohol offensive. I sat up slowly, the usual nausea kicking in, my head pounding, room spinning. I looked down at my shaky hands, trying to steady myself as I half rolled off the couch, a sweaty silhouette of me left behind, my tee, shirt stuck to me. I stumbled to the kitchen, only allowing one eye open to keep things in focus, my head down as I waited for the kettle to boil, impatient as the usual hangxiety kicked in. I knew my drinking was a problem, it always has been. But as I'm nearing 40 now, the mornings are becoming more unpleasant and unmanageable. But I know I'll never stop. I put 2 big scoops of coffee and boiling water into a mug, topping it off with a shot of vodka. I downed it and made another, willing the shakes to stop, my eyes blurry and stomach churning. I took the second mug back to the couch and turned on the TV, slowly coming back to life. My mind was quieter today, a numbness over the usual paranoia or anger that resides in me. Sometimes I think it's a darkness, straight from the pits of hell, the angel on one shoulder missing. As long as I could remember, I had been plagued with dark thoughts, a curse passed down from my abusive father. A life of isolation and self-sabotage, sending me spiraling further into this abyss over the years. Some days, I think I can snap out of it, or have a small voice telling me I need help, and that maybe there's still hope for me. But this had just become a way of life for me now, my norm. I had come to accept it. Alcohol and Netflix were my only friends. I sustained an easy work-from-home job that only stole a few hours each day. My manager didn't bother me, and I didn't bother him. He didn't care as long as I hit the numbers, which I always did. It didn't pay much, but kept a roof over my head and supplied my vices. I flicked straight to the news channel like I did every day. There had been a string of murders in the city, and now they were saying, there is a pattern suggesting that it's the work of serial killer. I shivered, watching as they wheeled a sixth victim in a body bag, a one-way trip to the morgue. My head pounded again. I swallowed some paracetamol with a swig of vodka, not taking my eyes off the TV. The killings had been brutal. I watched along each time with a morbid curiosity, like I was watching a fictional Netflix series about serial killers, almost forgetting that these were people living in the same city I am. All victims were female, early 20s, normally Good Samaritan types, people with a squeaky clean record who wouldn't have even stolen a pack of gum in their short life. Most were religious and attended church on a Sunday. I'd be safe, standing at 6 feet, fashioning a Jesus-length beard and enough petty crimes on my record to piss off anyone in law enforcement. The media were raving about the symbolism the killer left behind and had even given him a nickname, Son of Satan. It doesn't quite have the same ring as Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer, but they were just scratching the surface of what he does and what he is capable of. This guy was different. According to reporters, he stalks his victims over the course of 6 days, leaving satanic symbolism in his midst. Never leaves a trace of evidence, other than gifts of animal bones or a pentagram, sometimes an upside-down cross, all with no fingerprints or so much as a wisp of hair. The symbols were the only thing that changed from kill to kill. The 6-day stalk, bondage of the hands and feet, and 6 stab wounds to the heart were always consistent. I shivered again. On the dark web, some crime scene photos were leaked and spread vastly around social media. The bloody sight, something out of a horror movie. I chugged another glass of vodka. The police had nothing. They made an educated guess that it could be a male in their 30s or 40s. Probably some crazy religious guy that they had depicted as some skinny, sad sod who lives in their mother's basement. I rolled my eyes and half chuckled, a wheezy sound that made me cough. One thing they all agreed on was that the killer was clever and meticulous. He taunted his victims and he taunted police, never leaving a trace. All they could do was warn people to be safe and on guard. If anyone experienced any stalking or hints that they were next, were to report to police straight away. Boy, are they not ready for the amount of calls they're about to receive. The fear the media have installed does half the job for the killer. I rolled my eyes again, pouring another glass, slightly amused by the stupidity of law enforcement and media. I turned it off and opened my laptop to get on with some work before heading out to the shop. The bills aren't going to pay themselves. Completing work in record time, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, then finally brushed the rancid taste away, swallowing some toothpaste for good measure. I looked up at the disheveled guy staring back. Hair awry, bags hung heavy around my dark pinpoint-like eyes, the spit of my father. I inwardly groaned, my heart palpating slightly. I changed into some dark tracksuits, tamed my hair with cap and donned some sunglasses. I whistled as I walked outside, sweat pouring from my skin, the back of my neck clammy. I gritted my teeth with discomfort, while the sun beat down harder, the whistling a distraction. The streets were mostly empty, a few dog walkers and cars dotted around. I found myself at the shop and enjoyed the cool feel of air conditioning, taking a long breath in. I picked up the essentials: vodka, fags, and instant noodles, the economy making every transaction feel painful. I felt that rage again as I tapped my card and stormed out, trying to calm my thoughts, and drank the first bottle on my way back. Needing a pit stop, I paused on a bench, starting on my second bottle and chain smoking, until I felt sick and black spots started to cloud my sight. My head hurt, as evil thoughts and feelings flooded me. I eventually stumbled home, unsure how I got there and why it was so dark out already. I tripped over my own feet and crashed onto the couch face first, full blackness taking over. I was in and out of consciousness for several days, time missing as I looked at my watch and realized nearly a week had gone by. I really need to stop drinking. I went to the kitchen. Coffee, vodka, couch. The routine continued. I turned the TV on, and yet another murder had occurred, less than a mile from my home. Same pattern for the most part. I smirked and flicked to the next channel. Headline, Son of Satan breaks pattern. My eyebrows creased and my heart rate picked up. Killer stabs victim 6 times to the abdomen, left the house in disarray. Forensics have bagged new evidence. That couldn't be right. My father's voice boomed in my head. I switched to another channel. Son of Satan copycat killer. New information has come to light as detectives connect current killings with a string of murders with similar symbolism and pattern that happened 30 years ago in the countryside. Killer was never found. The voice boomed louder. I ran to the bathroom to throw up and realized my clothes were soaked with blood. I fucked up. My father would be writhing in his grave. His idiot son carrying on his legacy gets caught because he can't handle his booze. I threw up again. Panic rose and I gripped my chest as I struggled to breathe, spots of lights in my vision. The room was closing in. I turned on the shower, holding onto the sink with one hand, ripping off my clothes with the other, before allowing the scalding hot water to wash away my sins. "I'm sorry," I screamed, the disappointment of my dead dad all too much. I sobbed on the floor of the shower, shame and guilt ripping me apart. Red and blue lights flashed past my window, snapping me awake, and I stood up, getting ready run, fight or flight kicking in. Bang, bang, bang! My front door rattled. Panic-stricken, I scrambled for my clothes and slipped, the alcohol haze wearing off. My head hurt as it hit the sink on my way down. I couldn't move. The room was spinning. A louder bang. Footsteps. I faded out, just another dead girl underwater. Trigger warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article published by a local newspaper reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, and no. She was singing, She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl. The one who got scared at every creak in the dark. The one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully, a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her, before the trip, had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service, And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in, enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater. Better fires. Dear Jay, I lit the mailbox on fire when I saw you kissing M. Others told me that when feeling too much, one might hurt oneself. There might be cuts along the arm or starvation. I had no inclination toward self-harm. From a very young age, I understood that the world does enough to you. Why do any more to yourself? I saw you kissing M behind the cafetorium, and I ran all 7 blocks home. On the way, I saw the Gozer's blue mailbox, and I knew it had to burn. 1 match around the base, and it went up quickly along with whatever mail was inside of it. The red flag was up, and I did it anyway. Later that night, I attended a slumber party and started the rumor that you had done it, that I often saw you lighting ants on fire with a magnifying glass as though that was a natural origin for someone who would eventually begin setting better fires. Some of the girls believed me. Some didn't care. One told me that you kissed her after her shift at Pizza Grace, and your mouth tasted like a fountain drink. I watched her after she fell asleep. I visualized her waking up to find her hair on fire, but I didn't do it. I didn't want to hurt anyone, not even you. When I asked you to the dance, you told me that you'd already agreed to go with G, even though that was a lie. I knew it was a lie, because I knew enough about you by then. When you lied, your left eyebrow would twitch. Maybe it still does. Do you still lie? Would you tell me if you did? I told you that I understood and wished you well. I knew that you were going to ask G as soon as I was out of sight. Then, if you changed your mind, you'd simply pick someone else to bring. What you were never going to do is show up with me. Not me. The girl who had to wear baggy tops to hide how much she developed between sophomore and junior year. Not me. The know-it-all who the teachers had stopped calling on, because she always knew the path Napoleon took on his first campaign and the first 15 numbers of pi. I don't think intelligence was a turn-off for you. On the contrary, I think you wanted me to be smarter. You wanted me to be so smart that kissing me would be like allowing dark matter down your throat to rip you apart from the inside. You held me to a different standard. I'm sorry, Jay. I didn't know that's what was going on. I thought you just wanted to kiss the prettiest girls in the school. I never investigated what your deeper motives might have been. The day you told me you couldn't take me to the cotton candy dance, I went to the greeting card store in town and set fire to all the Get Well cards. They were at the back of the store, and there was only one cashier working. I made quite a pile, struck the match, and walked right out. By the time the smoke alarm went off, I was already watching from down the street. Lucky for me, greeting card establishments don't have security cameras. I went to a pool party the following weekend and told everyone there that you'd confessed to me a year ago that you hated greeting cards. Seeds were planted. A freshman who was at the party told me that you'd been putting removable tattoos in her locker. Hearts with knives in them and mermaids who refused to smile. She pulled down her bathing suit bottom and showed me where she'd placed one of the tattoos. It looked like Joan of Arc tied up and suffering her great punishment. I think you're right, she whispered to me in between bites of a burnt hamburger. I think he might be obsessed with fires. Why else would he give me this? The world will give you all the answers you want if you know exactly how to phrase the questions. On the way home from the pool party that day, I saw you in your front yard, mowing the lawn without a shirt on. I waved to you, and you waved back. You flexed for me, and then laughed. I saw a clean line of sweat going down your back to the gray t-shirt that was tucked into your red shorts. I wanted to cover myself in grass and let you run over me. It took me a moment to realize that my hand was still raised in a frozen greeting. You had stopped my time. You'd put me in a deep freeze. Only one thing could dissolve it. The day before graduation, I burned down the school. Part of me knew that eventually it would come to that. I'd used my allowance every week to buy kerosene, matches, bottles, rags, and any other accelerant I could find. The man at the hardware store questioned me about it early on, but I told him that teenage girls were using these types of things to help with our hormones. He seemed perplexed, but no man over 40 wants to know why teenage girls are doing any of the things they do. The next time I came in, he'd set aside some paint thinner for me. It was on sale, 2 for 1. That's what I used in the second floor bathrooms. There was no commencement that year, no caps, no gowns. The only thing thrown up in the air was the spray of a fireman's hose. Students gathered around the periphery of the school. Some cried. I held my homeroom teacher as she asked why anyone would do something like this. I knew that the two of you were writing inappropriate notes to each other between periods. She must have justified it by telling herself that you were mature for your age. And maybe she was right. I try not to condemn anyone if I can help it. The worst condemnation of all has already occurred. The day of the school fire was also the day of the harvest. Everything I'd put into the ground was ready to be reaped. Rumors about your love of starting fires were too widespread to ignore, even though, in many ways, you were the town's favorite son. Your father had been the star linebacker for the football team back when he was in school. Your mother was valedictorian. You were going to do great things, and you were going to go far, and you were going to kiss every girl you wanted to kiss, and never give me more than a wave or a flex of your muscles only to laugh at me for staring. All of that got burned up and turned to rubbish. You went to jail for the very first time. When you got out, you couldn't find a job. Your parents disowned you. You couldn't even find a woman gullible enough to take you in, because by then, you reeked of smoke. Soon, you were dealing drugs and holding up food marts and gas stations. I lost track of how often you were in and out of prison, but I know you're there now, and I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry for the part I played. I'm sorry for every match I struck. I'm sorry you didn't see that I could have learned more. I could have caught on faster. I could have bloomed had you only allowed me some light. When you get out, I plan to be waiting for you. I'll pick you up and you can come stay with me. You can mow my lawn. You don't have to give me anything, just the respect I was owed back when we were children. Back when you thought a little cold water would put me out. You never knew that I was electric, did you, Jay? You never tasted my grease. You never thought to smother me. A little cold water. What was that going to do? I'll be standing at the gates when they release you. I'll bring the cigarettes you like. I'll light the first one. Then, I want a kiss. A nice, long kiss. I want to taste the emission. I want you to fill me up with smoke until I feel as though I'm never going to breathe again.